This is the rock seat in the old rectory gardens that I stopped to rest on a couple of years ago. And this is the small hole that the dog was showing so much interest in. It didn't occur to me at the time that it could be what I saw as a child, because what I imagined was at least 2-3 foot wide and big enough for me to crawl into. The small opening appears to have a lintel running across the feature that could be wide enough, and the shot down the entrance of the hole appears to go way back, so it looks like Mr. Dog had found it. So on the next visit we brought a mini camera on an extendable pole and had a look in at what we could see in there. The litter, in my hazy recollection, was more like this than what you see today. So maybe there are layered deposits and rubbish etc. that can be dated. The gap is now 5-6 inches on the right hand side and far less on the left. The mini camera was on a flexible mount so it wouldn't interfere or mark the ceiling if it came into contact with it. There is a narrow entrance on the right that opens up into a void that could be 3 to 4 foot wide. The left hand side of the void has far less headroom than the right, and too small to try and fit the camera in, so it's only a guess from the footage. The camera went in between 9 and 10 feet, and we estimate the back wall was another 3 to 5 feet away from the footage. There seems to be a feature on the right that looks like it could be a pillar with space to the rear and to the front, judging by the shadows. If you spot any things of interest in the footage or have any thoughts on the pillar or possible niche on the right, then please share them with us in the comments. The ceiling has the same black sooty look that I recall, but I don't know if that's natural aging or if there was a fire in there at some point. As you can see, the left hand side is too full to try and get the camera in. It doesn't appear to stop at a solid wall, it just disappears into the darkness. That's about all we can see in what I'm calling the cave. I think it's more than just a historical rabbit hole. At ground level we see a small hole under a rock with a void full of litter and sandy soil, and it doesn't seem feasible that there is a human-sized entrance to it. But when you take its internal dimensions and signs of possible worked pillars, it makes one wonder. The view from the entrance level offers a different perspective. This wall has slowly collapsed over time, and I wonder if it was originally done by the Reverend Royds in the 1860s. The collapsed section offers us a glimpse at the soil and the structure of the path. I wonder if what we see above ground could be connected to something like this below the ground. Below the 2 or 3 inch of topsoil, there is a 4 footish sandy layer mixed up with stone, and it lines up with the same sandy layer that's in the cave, which does make me wonder if it was filled in by the Reverend Royds during his renovations. Whenever this wall does get scheduled for repair, it could perhaps be the opportune time to investigate what this feature really is. The rock graves on the headland are said to be ossuaries due to their size. Sites I've found online with ossuaries often have a tomb or a temporary grave nearby where the bodies are left to decompose and the bones are then collected and placed in the ossuaries. I wonder if this could be the temporary grave or tomb for whoever had been interred in the rock graves on the cliffs. Over the years, I've had a look online now and again to see if I can find any other rock graves like this of the same period in the UK, and I can't recall finding any other early Christian carved graves like this. I have found one from a later period, 1218-ish, in Yorkshire, St Robert of Knaresborough. Old Boy on YouTube has done a video about this site, but the shape of the grave and the erosion are very different to those at Heysham Head. I drew a blank trying to find similar graves in the UK, so I had a look at what I could find elsewhere, and I found some later medieval graves in Portugal and one place in France with early Christian graves of the right time period, and a much earlier place in Tangiers that both had similar attributes to that of Heysham. The graves were on some kind of alignment, and they were on a rocky headland overlooking water. The monastery was founded around the 5th century by an order of hermits that came from the order of St Anthony in Egypt, and then later in the 7th century it became part of the Benedictine order, when all religious orders had to be part of one of the larger officially recognised orders, which has echoes of a place close to Heysham. A couple of miles away on the other side of the Lune estuary is the remains of Cockersands Abbey. It was a long established order of hermits before I believe it also had to fall under the control of one of the larger recognised orders, and it was taken over by Leicester Abbey in 1184. If Cockersands Abbey was connected with Heysham Head, then I imagine any records would be hard to track down by now, if they still exist. The graves in Tangier date from the age of Carthage and the Punic Wars, and are over 2,000 years old. The shape of the graves are different from those at Heysham, but the wear and erosion are more comparable than the other sites. I know it may not sound plausible that the Phoenicians or Carthaginians were calling into Heysham for potted shrimp or fish and chips, but bear with me, there's more than a fishy theory, and perhaps not that implausible. Here's a couple of things that I've stumbled into over the years and have bookmarked that didn't seem connected until I watched a nautical adventure that an old sea dog that I know took part in. It was a historical mission to cross the sea from Ireland to Scotland in a hand-stitched boat in the spirit of St Columba's early voyages. On day 2 of their adventure, they arrive on Colonsay and get a great tour and a local history talk from Kevin. Here's an excerpt from it. Please do check out their amazing voyage that Darius put together on his YouTube channel.
What was really happening was that to some extent the Irish would have noticed an important, very ancient trading route which ran from Phoenicia right across the Mediterranean. It ran across the neck of the Iberian Peninsula to the peninsula of Cornwall, up the Irish Sea through Wales, taking it obviously the whole of the Irish Sea. Then it came up the Sound of Islay, up the Great Glen fault line and across into Scandinavia. And you'd have slaves and stuff going one way, and you'd have ambergris and narwhal horn and stuff of that nature, and furs going the other and stuff. So this was a trading route which ran right back into the Bronze Age.
Going right back into the Bronze Age is where we're heading next. Do you remember the archaeological dig done on a small section of the Barrow that had over 1,200 stone and flint artefacts from tool making that I mentioned earlier? Well, it wasn't just the flint that wasn't native to the area, a lot of the stone wasn't local either. The chances of them arriving over land was slim, I think. Back then, sea levels and the surrounding land drainage were different, and probably would have had a lot of tidal marshes around it, making the transport of lots of non-local stone from hundreds of kilometres away quite improbable. Heysham Harbour is built at the end of a natural deep channel called Heysham Lake that leads into the Lune Deeps and out to sea. They always have water in them, deep enough for ships. As children, we used to play on Middleton Sands when the tide was out and be amazed at the ferries and ships that appeared to be sailing on the sand. Back then, as it does now, this channel makes Heysham one of the few places accessible for ships when the tide is out. which makes the flint and stone's arrival by the sea routes most probable to me. I wonder if the non-local stone found here were ballast stones from ships that had taken on a cargo at the site and had been reworked and repurposed by the inhabitants in between ships. There is another site at the end of the bay called Wharton Crag that was a site of ancient trade. It's a limestone hill that would have been the highest point at that end of the bay. It has two caves and an 8-acre late Bronze Age or early Iron Age hill fort on top that I think had a connection with the Langdale axe trade. Part of the hill has been quarried for its limestone for many years, and close by is Wharton Stock Car Club. I believe it is built on old lime slag heaps. In the Bronze Age, lime was also used in the smelting process, so it may have been a resource that was traded along with axe heads. Goods could have been ferried in local shallow draft boats to Heysham on the tides, and then loaded onto larger trading vessels. A chap called David Ratledge has done a lot of hard work on tracing Lancashire's Roman roads. One of his presentations about the roads around Lancaster, he mentions that there was once a Roman wharf in the Carnforth area, which is where Wharton is, so I wondered if lime export was going on here back in the Bronze Age. He also discovered that there was a lost Roman road between Lancaster and Preston, and he found that it didn't go in a straight line as many people had thought. It had a dogleg in it that went to Cochrane, which coincidentally is the same place where Cockersands Abbey is. I don't know how relevant these two sites are in working out who did what and when on this site, but I think they are contenders. Darius and crew reminded us that early Christian travels in the Irish Sea were more than just possible in a small boat. So the idea that the monks of St. Patrick established a chapel is also a possibility. Here's something from the Viking era that I found on Heysham Heritage website that I didn't know anything about. The Battle of Brunaba in 937. There is a theory that Heysham could have been the landing site for the famous battle. The Battle of Brunaba was the biggest invasion in English history before the Battle of Hastings, and its exact location has been lost over time. I can't really absorb much from academic papers and lots of reading with my brain injury and stuff, but I found a couple of online presentations all about it that lay out what is known about the landing sites, and a couple of things mentioned in it might fit with this site. The first is over 600 ships were in the invasion fleet and they all landed on the same beach. And the second is the escape of the few ships after the battle was because they were moored by deep water. Middleton Sands would be big enough to accommodate a fleet of that size, and ships moored at the harbour end of Heysham Lake would probably have had access to deep water and easy escape via Heysham Lake. Some of the other things mentioned was that the landing site had a holy well or a fresh spring. Well, Heysham's got one of those, and a river close by, it's got one of those too, the Lune. And it was also the site of a Viking Thing. A Viking Thing was a place where they would gather to settle legal disputes, hold parliaments and make laws, etc. And I just wonder if the raised banking around the old rectory gardens could have been a Viking Thing at one point. That's about it for my ponderments on Heysham Head and the cave. Hopefully it's been of some interest to you, and maybe some of you have some further information to share that might fill in a few blanks about the site's history. Thank you very much for watching. I tried to keep it as short as possible. It's taken over 12 months with some help from a friend to put this video together bit by bit. Hopefully you can see why I think there's perhaps more to the site's history that's still to be discovered.